Illegal migration is a massive driver of global insecurity. It undermines our ability to control who comes here. And that makes people angry. It makes me angry, frankly, because it's unfair on ordinary working people who pay the price, from the cost of hotels to our public services struggling under the strain. There's also nothing progressive about allowing working-age people to come here illegally instead of supporting them to build their own economies, secure a better future for their own countries, and build a safer, more prosperous world.
Before we dive into why Keir Starmer's flagship promise is crumbling before our eyes, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to be here for what's coming next. Right, let's get into it. So Keir Starmer stood before the British public and made a promise that sounded rather good on paper. He'd smash the gangs. Those nasty people smugglers moving thousands across treacherous waters, charging fortunes for journeys that might end in tragedy. Bold word from our Prime Minister, weren't they? The sort of thing that plays brilliantly at press conferences and gets approving nods from focus groups. But here's the uncomfortable truth nobody in Westminster wants to admit. It's not working. And it never could. Over 35,000 people have crossed the channel in small boats this year alone. 35,000. And we're not done yet. By December, we could be looking at a number that surpasses the record set in 2022, nearly 4,000 to 6,000 crossings. So much for smashing anything, really. The boats keep coming, the gangs keep operating, and Starmer's promise is looking increasingly like what it always was, political theatre masquerading as policy. Now, before you think I'm being unnecessarily harsh, let me tell you what I've learned from people who've actually done the work Starmer claims he'll do. Journalists who've tracked these networks across continents. Investigators who've spent years understanding how this world actually operates. And what they've found is rather inconvenient for our government's narrative. The Prime Minister's approach could only ever be a stopgap measure. At best. At worst, it's a fundamentally flawed understanding of what we're actually dealing with. Think about it logically for a moment. Starmer's grand plan involves putting more pressure on the National Crime Agency and its international counterparts. Get them to work harder, arrest more smugglers, disrupt more networks. Sounds reasonable enough, doesn't it? Except international policing experts have been saying the quiet part out loud. They're being asked to do more work with less money. Budget cuts, staffing reductions, bureaucratic nightmares at every border. You can't squeeze blood from a stone, and you certainly can't smash global criminal networks when you slash the very agencies meant to do that work. But even if we threw unlimited resources at the problem, there's a more fundamental issue here. Cross-border policing is an absolute mess of red tape and diplomatic complications. To actually track down these smugglers means coordinating with source countries, transit countries, and destination countries. It means dealing with nations that might not share our priorities or our legal frameworks. It means navigating a web of international relationships that would give even the most seasoned diplomat a headache. If you're still watching, you're clearly someone who cares about understanding what's actually happening in this country rather than swallowing whatever narrative gets served up. Do yourself a favor and subscribe. We're going to keep pulling back the curtain on stories like this. Let me give you a concrete example of just how complex this really is. There's a smuggler named Osman Ali. One journalist tracked him across Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Senegal, Mauritania, Morocco, and Italy. That's not a typo. One man's operations spanned that many countries. He's part of a global network bringing migrants into Europe, accused of smuggling hundreds of people with claims of torture and deadly beatings during crossings. And where is he now? Living freely in a small Italian town, despite an international warrant for his arrest. That's what Starmer is up against. Not some East End criminal gang he can have the Met round up on a Tuesday afternoon. A genuinely global operation that shifts and adapts faster than any government agency can respond. Because here's what actually happens on the ground. According to people who've reported from border areas, the smuggling routes are constantly changing. Migration policies shift, so the routes shift. Border enforcement strengthens in one area, so the smugglers move to another. It's whack-a-mole, except the mole has access to international networks, encrypted communications, and decades of experience evading authorities. Some migrants act alone, finding creative ways to enter countries illegally. Others pay enormous sums for journeys that are becoming increasingly dangerous because of violent pushback campaigns. And the smugglers adapt to all of it. But we still haven't addressed the elephant in the room, have we? The question that makes politicians deeply uncomfortable. Why are people risking everything to make these journeys in the first place? Because unless we're willing to have that conversation, everything else is just noise. The real issue that Westminster doesn't want to recognize is staring us right in the face. Many people in the world are compelled to move. Not because they fancy a change of scenery or heard Britain's weather is lovely this time of year. They are fleeing the Taliban in Afghanistan. They are escaping war-torn Sudan. They are running from genocide, famine, persecution, regimes that would kill them for who they are or what they believe. For these people, staying home isn't an option. Home isn't home anymore. It's a death sentence. Make sure you're subscribed because we're about to get into the part of this story that really exposes how hollow Starmer's promise actually is. Try to imagine for just a moment what it takes to move your entire life and family across mountains and seas to a country you've never been to. You're leaving everything you know on a sliver of hope for potentially brighter prospects with no possibility of ever retaining. That's not a decision anyone takes lightly. Every single migrant who's been interviewed about their journey speaks of extraordinary challenges, risks that would make most of us turn back before we'd even started. But they don't turn back, because the alternative is worse. The grim reality is that for millions of people around the world, large groups simply can no longer call home home. Whether it's genocide or famine or authoritarian regimes, the place they were born is no longer survivable. And this isn't going away. If anything, it's getting worse. Climate change is making some parts of the world difficult or impossible to inhabit. We're looking at projections of hundreds of millions of climate refugees in the coming decades. So unless Starmer's planning to smash climate change along with the gangs, we'd better start thinking more seriously about this. Here's the uncomfortable truth that blows apart the entire smash the gangs narrative. Without more legal pathways for those seeking to emigrate, with robust checks to root out visa and asylum fraud, people will continue to seek out smugglers. Because what's the alternative? Stay and die? Watch your children starve? Hope the regime that's hunting you suddenly develops a conscience. The will to survive drives people to superhuman feats. One man left Afghanistan when the Taliban returned in 2021 and walked thousands of miles to France. 4 years later, he's still trying to cross the channel to be reunited with his brother in Birmingham. 4 years of trying. That's the level of determination we're talking about. Unless the world addresses the challenges people face in source countries, the need for migration will remain. Full stop. You can arrest every smuggler from here to Istanbul and more will take their place because the demand exists. It's basic economics applied to human desperation. And speaking of arrests, let's talk about what actually happens when police respond to political pressure to show they're doing something. They are often arresting low-level figures, the person piloting the boat across the channel, confiscating the boats themselves. It introduces some friction into the system. Sure, it's a blip, but breaking up global networks? Not even close. Because smuggling gangs aren't the organized mafias you see in films. There's no Don Corleone figure you can arrest and suddenly the whole operation crumbles. They're more like a vast web of nodes. You've got organizers like Ali arranging door-to-door travel, drivers shepherding people across Europe, street-level recruiters, police officers on the take looking the other way for the right price, financiers moving money around with little to no trace. Each node operates semi-independently. Take one out and the network adapts. Someone else fills that role. The system continues. So smashing the gangs would mean taking out every single one of these nodes simultaneously, across multiple countries, multiple continents. And even then, more would spring up in their place because the fundamental demand hasn't changed. Many experienced smugglers recognize what they do is illegal, but they'll tell you straight up that they provide a needed service. They are moving people away from death, persecution, and horrors most of us can't imagine. One smuggler in Turkey put it rather bluntly. Everyone calls us to say, God bless you. We didn't torture or kill them. Yes, we do this. It's a job, a commercial enterprise. And yes, we make money, but we do help them. That's how they see it. And before you dismiss that as self-serving justification, consider what another smuggler said. If you're very rich, you can go anywhere. He was referencing golden visas, the programs that let wealthy people buy citizenship or permanent residency in exchange for steep investments. But regular people cannot find a way. They have no chance to leave the country. Our way is the only way for people to leave. And there it is. The bit that makes this whole discussion so uncomfortable. For people with money, migration is perfectly legal. Buy your way into whichever country takes your fancy. But for everyone else, risk your life in a dinghy or accept whatever horrors you're running from. That's the system we've created. And Starmer thinks he can smash it with tougher policing and stern words at press conferences. The truth is significantly more complex than the soundbites suggest. Smashing the gangs is a nice slogan. It tests well with voters who are understandably concerned about immigration. But it's not a solution. It's not even addressing the actual problem. It's political posturing that allows the government to look tough while avoiding the genuinely difficult questions about why people migrate in the first place and what our moral and practical obligations are in response. If we're serious about dealing with channel crossings, we need to have serious conversations about legal migration pathways, about processing asylum claims efficiently and fairly, about working with source countries to address the conditions that make people desperate enough to risk everything, about climate change and how we're going to handle mass displacement in the coming decades, about whether our current approach to borders and migration is remotely fit for purpose in the 21st century. But those conversations are hard. They require nuance and long-term thinking and political courage. Much easier to promise you'll smash the gangs and hope nobody notices when the boats keep coming. So where does this leave us? With a prime minister who made a promise he can't keep, a problem that's only getting wise, and a political class that would rather talk tough than think seriously. Over 35,000 crossings this year. More next year, probably. And the year after that. Because the gangs aren't going to get smashed. The networks are too diffuse, too adaptable, too deeply rooted in fundamental human needs that our current system doesn't address. That's the reality. Not particularly comforting, is it? But at least it's honest. And if you appreciate that honesty, that refusal to peddle comfortable lies, then subscribe to this channel. We're going to keep bringing you these stories. The ones that matter. The ones that pull back the curtain on what's actually happening while everyone else is spinning fairy tales. Hit that subscribe button now. You know you want to. And come back next time because we've got plenty more to discuss about what's really happening in British politics. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.